Hey guys, tonight we are casting off from the grimy, mundane shores of civilization and setting sail for the so-called Golden Age of Piracy. Forget the swashbuckling romance, the witty banter, and the chests overflowing with pristine gold doubloons. We're going on a journey to experience what it was really like. And let's be honest, based on the historical menu, you might not survive the first week without developing a deep, personal hatred for flour. The greatest enemy you'll face out there isn't the Royal Navy or a mythical kraken, it's the gnawing, relentless misery of the food you're about to eat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And for a bit of fun, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. It's always cool to see where everyone is tuning in from. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in this port town is thick and heavy. It's a cocktail of smells, salt, rotting fish, damp earth, and the faint, sweet sour scent of cheap from spilling from a nearby tavern. This is your world. A world of back-breaking labor for pennies or worse. The constant threat of being pressed into service on a Royal Navy ship, which is basically a floating, disciplined prison where the pay is terrible and the flogging is frequent. But you've heard the stories, the whispers that drift from ship to shore like fog. Stories of men who have broken their chains, who live by their own rules under a black flag. They call themselves gentlemen of fortune. The authorities call them pirates. You just call them your only hope. The decision wasn't made in a flash of daring. It was a slow burn of desperation. You've weighed the options: a short, brutal life of poverty on land, or a potentially short but glorious life of freedom on the sea. You choose freedom. You find the right tavern, speak the right code words to a man with more scars than teeth, and just like that, you have a new job. Your signing bonus is a firm handshake and a tin cup of grog that burns all the way down. You're told to be at the docks at high tide and to bring nothing but the clothes on your back. As you stand on the wet cobblestones watching the tide creep in, you feel a knot of fear and exhilaration tighten in your stomach. The ship you're joining isn't a grand, majestic vessel from a painting. It's a captured merchant sloop, retrofitted for speed and combat. It looks weathered, scarred, and intimidatingly real. Its timbers are stained dark with torrent seawater, and the rigging overhead looks like a complex spider's web against the bruised twilight sky. You see the crew moving about on deck, a rough collection of men from all corners of the world, united only by their shared defiance. You take a deep breath, the last breath of your old life, and walk up the gangplank. The moment your foot touches the deck, a strange sense of belonging settles over you. This is a floating republic, a wooden island of outcasts. The captain, a man elected by the crew, lays out the articles, the pirate code you will live and die by. Every man has a vote, every man gets an equal share of the plunder, and every man is expected to fight. It sounds impossibly fair, a stark contrast to the rigid hierarchy you've known your whole life. Still debate how really democratic these ships were, arguing that a strong, ruthless captain could easily bend the will of the crew to his own. But to you, in this moment, it sounds like paradise. You are shown to your berth, which is less a bed and more a designated patch of deck or a hammock in the cramped, musty space below. The air is already thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, bilge water, and something else, something savory. A stew is being cooked in the galley, a last shoreside meal before the real voyage begins. You're handed a bowl of it, and it's surprisingly good. There are chunks of fresh meat, potatoes, onions. It's a feast. You eat with a kind of desperate joy, surrounded by your new brethren. You are one of them now. A pirate. A free man. You look out past the harbor toward the vast, open horizon. Out there is adventure. Out there is a new beginning. You have no idea that the memory of this simple, hot stew will soon become a tormenting fantasy, a ghost of a flavor you will chase through weeks of hunger and disgust. The dream is bright and dazzling, but the reality, as you're about to discover, is stored in the darkness of the cargo hold. The ship lurches a gentle, rhythmic crawl that will soon become the constant grammar of your life. The last lights of the port town are shrinking behind you, eventually becoming just another handful of faint stars in the inky blackness. The warmth of the stew and the camaraderie of the deck still linger, a pleasant buzz in your mind. You feel a hand clap down on your shoulder, hard and friendly. It's the quartermaster, a man named Silas. He has a weathered face, a braided beard, and eyes that seem to see right through you. On this ship, you're e-learning, the captain may be the head, but the quartermaster is the heart, managing the day-to-day running of the vessel, enforcing discipline, and most importantly, holding the keys to the larder. While the captain was the ultimate authority in battle, historians still argue over how much day-to-day power the quartermaster truly wielded, especially concerning the division of plunder and provisions. "Time for your education, lad," Silas grunts, his voice a low rumble like stones rolling in a barrel. "Forget sword fighting for now. The first thing you need to understand is what keeps this ship afloat. And it ain't just wooden tar." He jerks his head toward a hatch in the center of the deck. "Come on. Let me show you your future." He lifts the heavy wooden hatch, and a wave of cool, musty air washes over you. It's a stark contrast to the fresh, salty breeze on deck. This air is old, stagnant, and carries a complex bouquet of scents: damp wood, earthy sacks, sharp brine, and a faint, underlying soreness you can't quite place. He grabs a lantern, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows, and gestures for you to follow him down a steep, narrow ladder. The world above disappears, and you descend into the belly of the beast. The hold is cavernous and cramped at the same time. Barrels are stacked 3 high, lashed securely to the ship's ribs to keep them from rolling in heavy seas. Sacks are piled in precarious mountains, and crates are wedged into every available space. It's a masterclass in storage, but it's not exactly a 5-star pantry. "Right," Silas says, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "Listen, one water." He pats a large, damp-looking barrel. "This is life, if we're careful. We have a good cooper aboard, man who makes and fixes the barrels. You'd be surprised how many pirate careers ended not with a cannonball, but with a leaky cask and a slow death from thirst. That's a cheerful thought." He moves on, his lantern light sliding over a wall of rough burlap sacks. "Lesson to bread." He raps his knuckles against one of the sacks, and it makes a dull, solid thud like he just knocked on a wooden door. "See biscuit, or hardtack, if you prefer. Flour, water, maybe a little salt, baked until it's harder than a landlord's heart. Won't ever go bad." He grins, a flash of yellow teeth in the lantern light. "Well, mostly." You don't ask him to clarify. You just stare at the mountain of what is essentially edible rock and try to imagine chewing it. Then he leads you to another section of the hold, dominated by even bigger, more imposing barrels, these ones sealed with heavy lids. The sharp smell of brine is overwhelming here. "And lesson 3, he says, his voice dropping with a kind of grim reverence. "The meat." He gestures to the barrels, salt beef and salt pork. Cured in so much salt it could salt the moisture out of a rain cloud. Lasts for years. He leans in conspiratorially. "The men call it salt horse." You have a sinking feeling you already know. The idea of this meat is deeply unappealing. It doesn't look like food, it looks like a preserved punishment. Your eyes scan the rest of the hold. You see smaller barrels that Silas explains contain beer and, more importantly, rum. There are crates of dried peas, which look like tiny green pebbles, and some rounds of hard, waxy-looking cheese sealed in cloth. There's no color, no life, no freshness. It's a landscape of browns and grays, a diet of pure, monotonous preservation. This is the fuel for your grand adventure. This is the treasure you'll be consuming long before you ever find any gold. The romantic vision of the pirate's life, the one filled with feasting on freedom, begins to crack. You realize that freedom comes with a very specific, very bland and very, very hard menu. Silas claps you on the back again, seemingly mistaking your dawning horror for awe. "Keeps a man alive," he says cheerfully. "Now, let's get back on deck." We're catching a good wind. You climb the ladder back into the night air, but the salty breeze doesn't smell quite as liberating as it did 10 minutes ago. The first few days at sea are a blur of activity and adjustment. You're learning the ropes literally. Your hands, soft from a life on land, are already blistering and raw from hauling on coarse, tar-caked lines. You're learning to walk with a sailor's gait, your legs instinctively bracing against the constant, unpredictable motion of the deck. Your ear learning the names of the sails, the calls of the boatswain, and the unwritten rules of living in close quarters with 40 other men. And, for a little while, the food is almost bearable. Almost. This is the grace period, the honeymoon phase of your culinary voyage. While the ship is still relatively close to its last port of call, the crew gets to enjoy the last vestiges of fresh provisions. These are the things that couldn't be preserved, the items with a ticking clock, and they must be eaten before they succumb to the inevitable rot. The ship's cook, a one-legged man named Peg who communicates more through grunts and brandished ladles than actual words, is the king of this brief, fleeting kingdom of flavor. You see him emerge from his galley, a small, smoky shack built onto the deck, with a bucket of fish caught just that morning. He scales them with a practiced, brutal efficiency, their silver scales flying into the wind like confetti. They're fried up in a pan over the galley's precarious stove, and the smell is intoxicating. It's a scent of the real world, a reminder of London home. The fish is served with a dollop of what's left of the fresh butter, which is already starting to taste a bit tangy, a bit off. But no one complains. You devour your portion, bones and all, grateful for the simple, honest taste of it. The next day, it's the last of the shore-bought chickens. They'd been kept in a small coop on deck. They're clucking a strange, domestic soundtrack to the oceanic voyage. Now they are silenced. Peg turns them into a thin but savory broth, bulked up with the last of the wilting carrots and shriveled onions. You sip it from your wooden bowl, the warmth spreading through your dig against the cool sea spray. You watch the other men eat. They don't savor it. They inhale it, a fierce, almost desperate hunger in their eyes. They know this is the end of the line. Even the cheese, a hard, crumbly wheel that had been carefully wrapped in waxcloth, is brought out and distributed. Slices are hacked off with a dirk and passed around. You get a small, pungent wedge. It's strong and salty, and you nibble it slowly, trying to make the sensation last. This, you realize, is the last time you will taste something so complex for a very, very long time. As you eat, you look out at the horizon. It's a perfect, unbroken circle of blue. The coastline, which had been a comforting smudge on the horizon for the first day or so, has completely vanished. There is nothing but water in every direction. It's a profound and humbling sight. The feeling of freedom is immense, but so is the sense of isolation. The ship is your entire world now, and everything you need to survive is contained within its wooden hull. The disappearance of land is a powerful psychological moment for every sailor, a true cutting of the cord. Historians and maritime psychologists alike note that this is when the crew's mentality shifts from that of landsmen to true mariners, fully dependent on the ship and each other. That evening, as the sun bleeds across the sky in streaks of orange and purple, the final act of this fresh food farewell to takes place. The last of the ship's store of fresh fruit is brought up from the hold. It's a small barrel of apples, already a bit soft and bruised from the journey. The quartermaster Silas presides over their distribution with the gravity of a king dividing his empire. Each man gets one. Not half, not a piece. You hold it in your palm. It's a simple, miraculous thing. Its skin is cool and smooth. You bite into it, and the crunch is deafeningly loud in the relative quiet of the evening. The juice is sweet and sharp, an adulterated flavor on your tongue. It's the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. You eat it slowly, methodically, down to the core. Then you even chew on the seeds for a moment before spitting them into the sea. You see other men doing the same, a silent, shared ritual of farewell. This is it. This is the last echo of land, the final taste of a world you have left behind. A strange piece of maritime law suggests some sailors believed that spitting the seeds of the last fruit back into the ocean was a way of paying a tithe to the sea, ensuring a safe passage. It's likely just superstition, but out here, you'll take all the luck you can get. As you lick the last of the apple's sweetness from your lips, you feel a subtle shift in the mood of the crew. The brief period of feasting is over. The pot is finished. From tomorrow, the real journey begins. From tomorrow, you will be introduced to the staples. The preserved, the monotonous, the very soul of the ship's larder. The age of flavor is over. The age of hardtack has begun. The morning after the last apple is gone, you wake up thirsty. It's a deep, primal thirst that seems to pull at the back of your throat. The sun is already hot, beating down on the deck, and your work hauling ropes has left a crust of dried salt on your skin. You make your way to the scuttle, but the large cask of water to drink from. It's managed by the quartermaster, who doles out the daily ration. You hold out your tin cup, and he uses a ladle to scoop out a measure of water. You raise the cup to your lips eagerly and take a large gulp, and then you stop. The water doesn't taste right. It's not the cool, clean water you remember from the shore. It has a strange, slightly thick texture. It's warm, and it tastes woody, like you're drinking the barrel itself. There's a faint, unpleasant tang to it, a hint of something stagnant and dulled. You swallow it anyway, because you're thirsty, but the refreshment is tainted by a sense of unease. You look into your cup. The water isn't clear. It has a slight, greenish-yellow tint, and you can see tiny, dark specks swirling in it. First time tasting real seawater, lad, a grizzled sailor next to you chuckles, noticing your expression. He has a mouthful of brown, rotting teeth. Give it another week, it gets a personality. He wasn't kidding. As the days stretch into weeks, the water aboard the ship undergoes a horrifying transformation. The wooden casks, which seem so sturdy and reliable, are the perfect breeding ground for life. But not the good kind. First, the water becomes cloudy. The woody taste intensifies. Then, you start to notice a thin, slimy film forming on the inside of the scuttlebutt. The quartermaster does his best to skim it off each morning, but it's a losing battle. The water itself feels slick in your mouth. Soon the algae blooms. The water turns a definite, unappetizing shade of green. It starts to smell. The scent is faint at first, just a swampy odor, but it grows stronger each day until the area around the scuttlebutt has a permanent pond-scum aroma. Drinking it becomes a mental challenge. You have to force yourself to ignore the color, the smell, the texture. You learn to drink it quickly, to hold your nose, to think of other things. Some of the older sailors have a trick. They strain the water through a piece of cloth before drinking. This catches some of the larger bits, but it doesn't do anything for the taste. One of the more disgusting, and surprisingly common, small facts about life at sea was the life cycle within these water barrels. The algae would grow, then die and decompose, which in turn fed bacteria, giving the water not just a foul taste but making it effective for dysentery and other illnesses. It was a self-contained, wretched little ecosystem. The crew's morale seems to rise and fall with the quality of the water. On days when the ration seems particularly foul, tempers and shortened arguments break out over the smallest things. The quartermaster has to stand guard over the scuttlebutt, not just to ration the water, but to stop desperate men from trying to take more than their share. Thirst is a more powerful motivator than greed. Some historians debate whether the constant consumption of this foul water contributed more to non-combat deaths at sea than is commonly credited. While scurvy gets the headlines, the chronic gastrointestinal issues from drinking what was essentially bacterial soup would have weakened the men, making them more susceptible to other diseases and exhaustion. It was a slow, invisible poison. You start to understand the true value of rain. One afternoon, the sky darkens, and a sudden, violent squall descends upon the ship. While the crew scrambles to secure the sails and rigging, a different kind of activity begins. Men rush to lay out any canvas, any sailcloth, any container they can find on deck. They rig up makeshift funnels to guide the downpour into empty barrels. You stand in the middle of the deck, face upturned to the sky, letting the cool, fresh rain wash over you. You open your mouth and drink directly from the heavens. It's the most pure, most wonderful taste in the world. The crew is jubilant, cheering and laughing in the storm. For a few days, you will have clean water. The reprieve is a blessing, a temporary return to civilization in the middle of the desolate ocean. But the rain passes and the sun returns. The fresh rainwater is used up, and you are back to the green, slimy liquid from the main casks. You also begin to understand the central role of alcohol on the ship. The daily ration of grog rum diluted with water wasn't just for morale. The alcohol acted as a mild antiseptic, making the foul water slightly safer to drink. Or at the very least, it made you care a little less about the taste. Your evening cup of grog becomes the highlight of your day. Not for the buzz it provides, but because for a few moments, it masks the flavor of the swamp you are forced to drink to survive. The journey is long, and the water is only going to get worse. Now that you've accepted the grim reality of your drinking water, it's time to be formally introduced to your primary source of calories. The backbone of your diet, the thing you will be eating day in and day out for weeks, possibly months on end. The quartermaster Silas handles the distribution. After the morning's work is done, the crew lines up, and he stands before a large, open sack. Inside are not soft, fluffy loaves of bread, but hard, dense, off-white crackers about the size of your palm and an inch thick. They look less like food and more like pieces of building material. Silas hands you your daily ration, one biscuit. Just one. This, along with your cup of slimy water, is your breakfast. You take it. It feels heavy, unnerving, solid. You tap it against the wooden railing of the ship. It makes a sharp, distinct clack like a stone. This is hardtack. The name is brutally honest. It's made from a simple recipe: flour, water, and sometimes a bit of salt. The dough is kneaded, shaped, and then baked multiple times at a low temperature until every last molecule of moisture has been mercilessly evicted. The dough isn't flavor or texture, it's longevity. A properly baked sea biscuit can last for years, which is precisely why it's the perfect food for a long voyage, in theory. You look around and see how the veteran sailors are tackling the problem. No one is simply biting into it. That would be a fool's errand, a direct invitation to lose a tooth. Instead, you see a variety of techniques. One man places his biscuit on the deck, covers it with a cloth, and smashes it into smaller, more manageable pieces with a belaying pin. Another is patiently soaking his in his cup of grog, waiting for the alcohol-laced water to slowly soften the cracker into a sludgy, edible paste. You decide to try a simpler method. You find a relatively clean spot on the deck, sit down, and try to break a piece off with your hands. It's impossible. It has the consistency of fired brick. You try hitting it against the mast. It barely makes a dent. Finally, in a moment of frustrated inspiration, you use the heavy pommel of the knife at your belt. You give the biscuit a sharp rap, and a corner satisfactorily shears off. You pop the small piece into your mouth. The first sensation is one of profound, almost aggressive blandness. It tastes of nothing. It's just dry, dusty flour. The texture is gritty, sandy. As you begin to chew, your saliva slowly, painstakingly, begins to soften it. It's a laborious process. Your jaw aches. It feels like you're chewing on a piece of wood. After what feels like an eternity, you manage to grind it down into a swallowable paste. You've successfully consumed about 1/8 of your breakfast. One of the more peculiar and less appetizing facts about hardtack is its sheer density. There are historical accounts from the British Royal Navy of sea biscuits being used for other purposes. They were reportedly used as makeshift plates, carved into game pieces for checkers, and in one apocryphal story, a captain even used varnished biscuits as decorative tiles for his cabin floor. Whether that last one is true is a matter of historical debate, but it certainly speaks to the legendary durability of the stuff. You look at the rest of your biscuit. This is it. This is what will keep you alive. You begin to understand that eating on this ship is not an act of pleasure. It is a chore. It is work. It's the laborious conversion of a rock-hard substance into the energy you need to haul ropes and climb rigging. There is no joy in it, only grim necessity. As the days go on, you develop your own ritual. You learn to smash the biscuit first, always. You learn that letting the pieces soak in water or grog for at least 10 minutes is the optimal strategy. The result is a foul-looking, porridge-like mush, but it saves your teeth and your jaw. Sometimes, Peg the cook will take the day's ration of biscuits for the entire crew, smash them all into a coarse powder, and boil it in a large cauldron with some of the salt horse to create a thick, unholy stew called lobscouse. It's a lumpy, salty, beige gruel, but it's hot, and for that, you are grateful. You think back to the fresh, crusty bread you used to buy at the bakery in your old port town. The memory is so vivid, so painful, that you have to push it out of your mind. To dwell on such things out here is a form of self-torture. Your reality now is the hardtack. You learn to accept its blandness, its unforgiving texture. You learn to see it not as a cruel joke, but as a tool for survival. But there's a secret hiding within the sea biscuit, a surprise ingredient that you haven't yet discovered. The flour and water may be its intended components, but as you'll soon learn, you're rarely the first one to eat it. It's been a few weeks now. You've settled into a routine. You smash your biscuit, you soak it, you eat the resulting mush. You've come to accept the blandness, the sheer monotony of it all. You think you've mastered the art of consuming hardtack. You are wrong. The true test of your stomach and your sanity is about to begin. One evening, you're feeling particularly hungry. The day was spent high in the rigging, mending a sail in the whipping wind, and the single biscuit from the morning feels like a distant memory. The evening meal is another biscuit. Instead of soaking it, you decide to just eat it dry, piece by piece, hoping the slow, deliberate chewing will trick your stomach into feeling fuller. You're sitting in the gathering dusk, the ship gently rocking beneath you, to see what you're doing. You hold your piece of biscuit up to the last fading rays of sunlight, and that's when you see it. The tiny, dark head pokes out of a small hole in the cracker. It wiggles for a moment, then retreats back inside. You stare at the biscuit, your heart sinking. You bring it closer to your eye. The surface, which you had always assumed was just unevenly baked, is riddled with minuscule tunnels. You break the piece in half. The inside is a horrifying labyrinth of tiny corridors, and crawling within them are small, pale, maggot-like larvae in the dark, beetle-like insects that laid them weevils. A wave of nausea washes over you. You look down at the piece you just chewed and swallowed. How many of them were in there? You feel a phantom crawling in your throat. You look over at the sailor next to you, a veteran named Finn, who is happily munching away on his own biscuit. Finn, you say, your voice barely a whisper. There are things. Finn looks at your horrified face, then at the infested biscuit in your hand, and lets out a short, barking laugh. Ah, you finally met the ship's other crew, he says, not unkindly. Flower weevils, or sea maggots, if you're feeling poetic. They get into the sacks of flour back on land, lay their eggs, and by the time we're a few weeks out, they've hatched and made a home of it. He takes another bite of his own biscuit without even looking at it. Consider them extra protein, lad. A little meat with your bread. You can't believe it. This is the secret ingredient. The surprised Silas had hinted at. This is what you've been eating for weeks. The sheer disgust is overwhelming. You feel an urge to throw the rest of your ration overboard, to purge your stomach, to never eat again. But hunger is a powerful master. It gnaws at you, insistent and unforgiving. Finn sees the conflict on your face. Here's a trick the old hands know, he says, leaning closer. Eat in the dark. He grins. What the eye don't see, the stomach don't mind. It's a shockingly simple and deeply disturbing piece of advice. And it becomes your new reality. From that day on, you, like many others, adopt the strategy of the nocturnal eater. You wait until full darkness has fallen on the deck. You try not to think about looking. You try not to think about the texture, about any slight, soft pop or crunch that feels out of place. You just chew and swallow, focusing on the sheer, desperate need for calories. This practice of eating hardtack in the dark to avoid seeing the weevils is a well-documented piece of maritime history. It wasn't just a pirate quirk. Sailors in the Royal Navy did the same. It was a coping mechanism for a disgusting, but unavoidable reality. In fact, some sailors would tap their biscuit on the table before eating, not to break it, but in the hopes of dislodging some of the scurrying inhabitants before they took a bite. The question of whether the protein from the weevils provided any meaningful nutritional benefit is a topic of some, shall we say, niche academic debate. The consensus is likely not, but it certainly adds a grim layer to the sailor's diet. You start to notice the little signs you missed before. The way some men would dunk their biscuit in their drink and wait for the little black beetles to float to the surface before skimming them off. The way the ship's cook, when making lobscouse, would just stir it all in, boiling the insects and larvae along with the biscuit crumbs into the final grey stew. There was no escaping them. They were part of the menu. The psychological toll is strange. You are in a constant state of mild revulsion. Every meal is a battle against your own gag reflex. Yet you eat. You have to. The hunger is always there, a more present threat than the bugs. You learn to compartmentalize, to build a wall in your mind between the act of eating and the knowledge of what you are eating. But the knowledge is always there, a crawling, squirming presence in the back of your mind. It's a profound violation of a basic human instinct to eat clean, safe food. Out here on this floating republic of freedom, you are free from the laws of kings and countries, but you are a slave to the weevil. Your stomach has reluctantly protesting lie, made its peace with the weevils. You've accepted that your daily bread comes with its own tiny herd of livestock, but the hardtack is only one half of the monotonous core of your diet. The other half is the salt horse. Today, for the first time, Peg the cook has decided it's time to break open one of the barrels of preserved meat. The event has a certain ceremony to it. A few strong crew members heave and grunt, prying the heavy, salt-crusted lid off one of the massive barrels from the hold. A thick, almost visible wave of concentrated brine odor washes over the deck. It's a smell so salty it makes your eyes water. You crane your neck to see inside. The barrel is filled to the brim with a dark, reddish-brown substance, swimming in a murky, greasy brine. It doesn't look like meat. It looks like a collection of strange, misshapen hunks of wood, dyed a rusty color. Peg reaches in with a long iron hook and pulls out a piece. It lands on the deck with a heavy, solid thud. This is the famous salt beef or salt pork, the protein that's meant to keep you strong for battle and hauling ropes. The name salt horse is a piece of gallows humor common among sailors. The meat was often so old, tough, and discolored that the men joked it must have been carved from an old horse that died of natural causes before being packed in salt. While it was almost always beef or pork from naval suppliers, the nickname stuck, perfectly capturing the quality of the product. The cook takes a bucket of that slimy, green water you've become so accustomed to unpours it over the hunk of meat, trying to wash off the thickest layer of caked-on salt. Then, he takes a cleaver and tries to chop a piece off. The cleaver bounces off with a dull clang, as if HED struck a rock. The meat is not just tough, it's petrified. The heavy salting process has drawn out all the moisture, replacing it with preservative salt, turning the muscle fibers into something akin to leather. Undeterred, Peg takes the entire block of meat and drops it into his cauldron of boiling water. The plan is to boil it for hours, not necessarily not yet, to try and leach some of the overwhelming salt back out into the water, so that it becomes remotely edible. The cauldron bubbles away for most of the afternoon, and the smell of hot, salty, boiled old meat fills the air. It's not an appetizing smell. Later that evening, it's time for dinner. Peg has fished the boiled hunk from the cauldron. It's now a slightly softer, grayish-brown color. He manages to shred it into stringy, fibrous strands. Your portion is a small pile of these salty meat strings, served alongside your usual weevil biscuit. You stare at it. You pick up a piece. It's tough and chewy, like gnawing on a rope, and the salt, it's overwhelming. Even after hours of boiling, the salt meat is so intense it makes your tongue tingle and your throat cry out for water, which of course is a precious, rationed commodity. This is a culinary catch-22 of the sea to make the meat edible. You have to boil it, which uses up fresh water. But eating the incredibly salty meat then makes you desperately thirsty, demanding more water. The logistics of it are a nightmare. This is why some historians argue about the true cost of salt meat, positing that its consumption directly led to faster depletion of freshwater stores, shortening the potential range and duration of voyages. You chew and you chew, and you chew, and you chew, and you chew. Your jaw, already sore from the hardtack, gets a whole new workout. The flavor is non-existent beyond the wall of salt. There's no hint of beef or pork, just a vague, savory-ish, fibrous texture. You see some of the older sailors carving their portion of salt horse into intricate shapes, little sculptures of animals or ships. It's a common pastime, a way to kill time and add a bit of black humor to the meal. They call it whittling the old man. It says a lot about your food when it's durable enough to be a craft material. You manage to swallow your portion, washing it down with your ration of grog. The rum helps cut through the saltness, a brief, fiery relief. You realize that the entire diet on this ship is a system of interlocking miseries. The biscuit is hard as a rock and full of bugs. The meat is tough as wood and salty as the sea itself. The water is green and slimy. And the grog, the one small pleasure, is necessary to make the whole wretched experience just barely tolerable. You think about the concept of a square meal. On land, it means a proper, satisfying, nutritious meal. Out here, you suspect it refers to the shape of the biscuit and the block of salt horse it's served with. You're getting your 3 squares a day, all right. They're just hard, salty, and crawling with insects. This isn't dining, it's fuel consumption, and the fuel is of the lowest possible grade. In the midst of this culinary wasteland, there is one man who stands between you and pure, unadulterated subsistence. He is the ship's cook. On your vessel, he is the one-legged man named Peg. You never learn if he was born with that name or if he earned it along with his wooden prosthesis. To be a cook on a pirate ship was a unique, and often dangerous, profession. Peg's domain is the galley. It's not a kitchen. It's a small, soot-stained shack precariously situated on the main deck. Inside, it's a marvel of cramped efficiency. His stove is a bed of sand in a shallow wooden box reinforced with bricks, where he maintains a small precious fire. This brickets and construction was a vital fire prevention measure on a wooden ship. A stray spark could mean the end of everyone. The constant fear of fire meant that in rough weather, the galley fire would be extinguished, and the crew would have to eat their rations cold, a truly miserable prospect. Peg himself is a creature of routine and temper. He moves around his tiny space with a surprising agility, his wooden leg making a steady, rhythmic thump scrape on the deck. He has one arm, the other having been lost, as rumor has it, to a Spanish cannonball. With his remaining hand, he wields his ladle and his cleaver with an authority no one dares question. Ship's cooks in the age of sail were often sailors who had been maimed in battle. They could no longer climb the rigging, but their service earned them a place on the crew, performing one of the few essential jobs that didn't require good hands and feet. His job is not to create delicious food. That is an impossible fantasy. His job is to transform the inedible into the barely edible. He is a master of disguise, an alchemist of the awful. He is the one who takes the weevil-infested biscuit crumbs, the stringy salt horse, and a few handfuls of dried peas that have been soaking for a day, and boils them all together into the thick, grace known as lobscout. He might throw in a bit of hoarded pepper or some ship-grown mustard greens if he's feeling generous, desperate to mask the true nature of the ingredients. You watch him one day, fascinated. He is the ultimate pragmatist. He wastes nothing. The greasy, scummy water left over from boiling the salt horse, he saves that. It's called slush, and it's a valuable commodity. It gets stored in a barrel and becomes a sort of all-purpose fat for cooking. It can also be mixed with flour and scraps to make a disgusting but calorie-dense fried cake known as a D under funk. The name alone tells you everything you need to know. One of the more bizarre and debated aspects of the ship's cook's role was his slush fund. On naval and some merchant ships, the cook was allowed to sell the slush to tallow makers when they reached port. The money he made was his to keep. Whether this practice carried over to pirate ships is a point of contention among historians. Some argue that on a vessel where all plunder was shared, the cook's slush would have been considered communal property. Others believe this small perk was granted to the man responsible for feeding 100 surly, hungry pirates. Life for the cook is a constant battle. He has to guard his supplies jealously from rats and from desperate crew members. A stolen onion or a filched handful of flour could be a major crime on a ship where every calorie is counted. Peg sleeps in his galley, his cleaver never far from his hand. He is often blamed for things for the weevils in the biscuit, the toughness of the meat. Grumbling about the cook is a time-honored sailor's tradition. But everyone, knows that his job is essential. He is the warlock who performs the daily miracle of turning rocks and leather into something that can be swallowed. Sometimes, if the weather is calm and the fishing is good, Peg gets a chance to work with fresh ingredients. When a flying fish lands on deck, he snatches it up with a triumphant grunt. When a turtle is caught, he oversees its butchering with grim expertise, knowing that its meat will provide a welcome, if temporary, relief from the salt horse, and its blood can be drunk to ward off disease. These are the good days. On these days, Peg is almost cheerful. You might even be heard humming a tuneless sea shanty as he works. You learn to respect Peg. You may not love his cooking, no sane person could, but you respect his resilience and his ingenuity. He is a craftsman of the highest order. His materials just happen to be the worst in the world. He keeps the engine of the crew running on the lowest quality fuel imaginable. He is the gruff, one-legged, one-armed heart of the ship's miserable digestive system. And as long as you see smoke coming from his galley chimney, you know you will eat today, but it will be something. And out here something is everything. Beyond the holy trinity of hardtack, salt horse and slimy water, there are a few other items in the ship's larder, meant to provide some semblance of variety. These are the luxuries. Today you get to experience one of them, the ship's butter and cheese. The quartermaster announces that the ration will be supplemented with a bit of dairy. A murmur of genuine excitement triples through the crew. It's a break from the norm, a taste of something different. You picture a sharp, crumbly cheese or a creamy, salty butter, a memory from a life that feels 100 years away. Your hopes, as usual, are about to be mercilessly dashed against the rocks of reality. 2 small barrels are brought up from the hold. One contains the cheese, the other the butter. The cook, Peg, pries the lid off the butter cask first. A smell hits you immediately. It is not the fresh, creamy scent of dairy. It is a sharp, acrid, deeply rancid odor. The smell of fat that has gone very, very wrong. You see the top layer of the butter. It's a dark, almost orange color, with a greasy, waxy sheen. The substance that clings to it is not smooth. It's lumpy and separated, a grotesque mixture of pale, fatty solids and a thin, oily liquid. This is ship's butter. To preserve it for a voyage, it was heavily salted and packed tightly into firkins or small barrels. But it was a losing battle. The constant motion of the ship, the temperature changes, and the simple passage of time meant that it would inevitably go rancid. The fat molecules break down, creating butyric acid, the same compound that gives vomit its distinctively sour smell. That's the aroma currently gracing your nostrils. Undeterred, the cook scrapes a small portion of this pungent, waxy substance onto your biscuit. You stare at it. It glistens menacingly in the sun. You take a tentative bite. The taste is even worse than the smell. It's a powerful, sour, cheesy flavor that coats your entire mouth with a greasy film. It's so strong it almost burns. You see other men eating it with a kind of grim determination. This is calories. This is calories. This is fat. And on a diet severely lacking in it, even rancid butter is a valuable source of energy. Next, the cheese. The wheel of cheese is unwrapped from its waxcloth shroud. Unlike the hard, dry cheese you had at the beginning of the voyage, this one has not aged well. It's a softer cheese, and in the heat of the hold, it has begun to weep, releasing a greasy, strong-smelling oil. The rind is dark and mottled, and the cheese itself has a disturbingly sick appearance. Peg hacks off a small wedge for you. You sniff it. It smells powerfully of ammonia. As cheese ages, especially in poor conditions, the proteins break down, releasing ammonia. It's a sign of a cheese that is well past its prime. But again, no one is throwing it away. The texture is strangely rubbery, and the flavor is an assault on the senses. It's incredibly sharp, salty, and has that distinct, chemical bite of ammonia. It makes the back of your throat tingle. One of the more stomach-turning tidbits from this era is the description of skipper cheese. The skippers were the larvae of the cheese fly, which would infest the wheels of cheese stored in the hold. These tiny maggots would writhe and jump, hence the name skippers and all, considering them just another part of the meal. There is, as you can imagine, a robust historical debate about how common this was. And whether it was born of desperation or a completely desensitized palate, you inspect your piece of cheese closely. You don't see any skippers today. It's a small mercy. You choke down your ration of rancid butter and ammonia cheese. The foul taste lingers in your mouth for hours. It's a chemical slick that even a swig of grog can't fully erase. You start to understand the pirates' obsession with spices. When they raided a merchant ship, they weren't just after gold. They were after pepper and nutmeg cloves. Not because they were gourmands, but because they were gourmands, but because they were the only thing that could mask the taste of food that had gone bad. A pinch of nutmeg could make rancid butter bearable. A heavy dose of pepper could disguise the flavor of meat that was starting to turn. Your meat is over, but the memory of it remains a greasy stain on your palate. You look out at the endless blue of the ocean and realize the true poverty of this life. It's not just a lack of gold. It's a lack of everything that makes life pleasant. It's a lack of clean water, fresh bread, and cheese that doesn't smell like a chemistry experiment. The freedom of the pirate is the freedom to be hungry, to be thirsty, and to eat things that would make a starving dog on land turn up its nose. This is the price of your black flag, paid one disgusting, rancid bite at a time. After a meal of salty, stringy beef and chemically scented cheese, there is only one thing on every crewman's mind: the evening grog ration. This isn't just a happy hour, it's a vital part of the ship's internal economy and a cornerstone of daily life at sea. As the sun begins to dip towards the horizon, a palpable sense of anticipation builds on deck. This is the moment that punctuates the day, washing away the grit of hard labor and the foul taste of dinner. The quartermaster Silas presides over the ceremony with his usual stern demeanor. He stands by the grog tub, a large, open barrel where the magic happens. Next to it is a much smaller, more secure barrel, bound in iron hoops and kept under lock and key. This is the rum cask, the ship's liquid heart. He unlocks it with a flourish, and the rich, sweet, alcoholic scent of rum cuts through the salty air. It's the best thing you've smelled all day. He measures out the neatrum into a bucket. Then he turns to the scuttlebutt, the barrel of slimy green water. He begins to dilute the rum. The official recipe for grog, as mandated in the British Royal Navy from 1740 onwards, was 1 part rum to 4 parts water. The practice of diluting the rum was introduced by Admiral Edward Vernon, nicknamed Old Grog because of his penchant for wearing a G-Rogram cloak. The sailors named the drink after him. The practice of watering down rum was common sense. It stretched the precious supply and, more importantly, it kept the crew from getting too drunk to function. A ship full of sober, resentful men was bad, but a ship full of drunk, armed men was a floating disaster waiting to happen. Silas mixes the concoction, stirring it with a large wooden ladle. On some ships, a bit of lime or lemon juice might be added, ostensibly to improve the taste of the water. Later, it would be discovered this was the key to preventing scurvy, but for now, it's just a flavor enhancer. Your ship doesn't have any citrus left, so tonight's grog is the classic 2-ingredient recipe: strong rum and bad water. The crew lines up, tin cups in hand. This is the most orderly you ever see them. There's no pushing, no shoving. Each man waits his turn patiently. The quartermaster knows the crew, and he knows their thirst. He ladles out the daily tot, a single serving for each man. You get your cup. It's still warm from the sun-baked deck, and the liquid inside is a murky brown. You take a sip. The effect is immediate. The raw power of the rum is still there, a fiery kick that burns its way down your throat and spreads a pleasant warmth through your chest. But it's mellowed by the water, made less aggressive. Most importantly, the alcoholic, sugary flavor of the rum completely overpowers the swampy taste of the water. For a few glorious moments, you can drink without tasting the algae and the slime. It's a chemical magic trick, a temporary purification. This, you realize, is the primary function of grog, not just to intoxicate, but to sanitize, to make the undrinkable drinkable. Why was this the spirit of the sea? This is a point of some interest for food historians. The answer is tied to colonialism and commerce. As European powers established sugar plantations in the Caribbean, they found themselves with a massive surplus of molasses, a byproduct of the sugar refining process. Distilling this molasses into rum was a cheap and efficient way to turn a waste product into a valuable and highly potent commodity. It was readily available in the ports where pirates and sailors operated. It was cheap, and it traveled well. It became the default currency of morale. You see the men relax as they drink their ration. The hard edges of the day begin to soften. Conversations start, a sea shanty might be sung, a game of cards might be played. The grog is a social lubricant, easing the constant friction of living in such close, harsh quarters. It's a brief escape, a moment of communal peace before the night watch is set. Of course, the distribution of alcohol on a pirate ship was a subject of fierce regulation, laid out in the ship's articles. A man found drunk and neglectful on his watch could be severely punished, sometimes even marooned. The balance between maintaining morale and maintaining order was a constant tightrope walk. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these rules, citing numerous accounts of pirate crews descending into drunken chaos after capturing a prize ship laden with wine or brandy. You finish your cup, the warmth spreading to your limbs. The world seems a little less grim. The memory of the rancid butter and salty meat fades. The prospect of another day of hard labor seems slightly less daunting. The grog isn't a luxury, it's a tool. It's medicine for the foul water, a balm for the weary soul, and a solvent for the day's frustrations. It's the glue that holds this fragile, violent society together, one measured, murky cup at a time. This entire enterprise would probably collapse under the weight of its own misery. The ship has been at sea for over a month now. The rhythm of your life has become deeply ingrained, the pre-dawn chill, the hard labor, the wretched food, the brief solace of grog, the fitful sleep in a swinging hammock. You've grown leaner, tougher. Your hands are calloused, your skin is weathered, but a new, more insidious problem is beginning to surface. It starts not with a dramatic symptom, but with a feeling. A deep, profound, and unshakable weariness. It's a fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. You wake up feeling as tired as when you went to bed. Your muscles ache, not with the satisfying soreness of a good day's work, but with a dull, persistent throb. Climbing the rigging, a task that had become second nature, now leaves you breathless and dizzy. Your limbs feel heavy, as if they're being pulled down by an invisible weight. You try to shake it off, blaming the monotonous diet and the hard work. But you see it in the other men too. The crew's energy has plummeted. There's less laughter, fewer sea shanties. The men move slowly, listlessly, as if they're wading through thick mud. Tempers are frayed, and small arguments flare up with alarming frequency. The ship feels sluggish, not because of the collective exhaustion of its crew. Then you notice something else. Your gums have started to feel tender. When you chew on your morning biscuit mush, there's a dull ache. You run your tongue over them. They feel soft, almost spongy. One morning, you see a smear of blood on the rim of your cup after taking a drink. You discreetly examine your mouth. Your gums are swollen and have taken on a dark, purplish hue. They bleed with the slightest pressure. You keep this to yourself, a secret shame. You think it's some kind of mouth infection, a personal failing. But then you overhear two older sailors talking in hushed, weary tones. One of them complains of an old scar on his arm, a souvenir from a knife fight years ago, that has started to ache and itch. He says it looks strange, puffy and discolored. The other man nods, his face grim, and mentions that his joints are so stiff and swollen he can barely close his fist. This is the quiet, creeping onset of scurvy. It's the disease of the long sea voyage, the great unseen killer. For centuries, it was a profound medical mystery. No one knew what caused it. Was it the bad air below decks, the dampness? The salt humors of the sea theories abounded, but none of them were right. They didn't know that the cause was not a presence. The devastating absence of a single, simple nutrient, vitamin C. Your body cannot produce or store vitamin C. You need a constant supply from your diet, from fresh fruits and vegetables. After a month at sea, eating nothing but preserved meats, biscuits, and rancid fats, your body's tiny reserve has been completely depleted. And now the slow, systematic collapse begins. Vitamin C is essential for producing collagen, the protein glue that holds your body's cells together. Without it, your body literally starts to fall apart. The first stage is the fatigue and the sore gums. The capillaries in your gums are fragile, and without collagen to reinforce them, they break and bleed. Old scar tissue, which is essentially a collagen patch, can't maintain itself and begins to dissolve, making old wounds seemingly reopen. This phenomenon was a terrifying, unbaffling symptom for sailors, and for a long time, its connection to the other symptoms of scurvy wasn't fully understood. Historians of medicine still marvel at the bizarre and horrificously diverse symptoms of this deficiency disease. You feel a growing sense of dread. There's a new enemy on board, one you can't fight with a cutlass or a cannon. It's an invisible decay, a rotting from the inside out. It saps your strength, your will, your very essence. You look at the faces of your crewmates and see the same exhaustion, the same quiet fear reflected in their eyes. The ship has become a floating hospital, and everyone is a patient. The men start to try their own folk remedies. Some chew on their tobacco with more vigor, believing it cleans the mouth. Others rinse with salt water, which only makes their bleeding gums sting ferociously. No one knows what to do. The problem is in the food, but the food is all you have. You are trapped on a ship full of poison that you must eat to live, and the one thing that could save you a simple piece of fruit is a memory, a fantasy, a world away. The initial, subtle pains are just a warning. The true curse of scurvy is yet to show its full, horrifying face. The quiet weariness of the past few weeks has now blossomed into a full-blown nightmare. Scurvy is no longer a secret, whispered fear. It is a visible, undeniable horror that has gripped the ship. The curse of the sea, as the old sailors call it, is upon you. Your own body feels like a traitor. The spongy, bleeding gums are now so swollen they have begun to grow over your teeth, making chewing an agonizing experience. A loose tooth, which you first thought was a fluke, has been joined by others. You can wiggle them with your tongue. You live in constant fear that they will simply fall out into your bowl of lobscouse. The simple act of eating has become a torment of blood, pain, and the terror of losing your teeth. Your skin is a roadmap of the disease. Dark, purplish-black spots have appeared on your legs and arms. They look like old bruises, but you don't remember any injury. These are spots of spontaneous bleeding under the skin as your capillaries, deprived of their collagen reinforcement, burst. Your joints are swollen, filled with fluid, making every movement a sharp, grinding pain. Getting out of your hammock in the morning is a monumental effort that leaves you gasping and sweating. The psychological toll is as devastating as the physical one. A profound, deep-seated depression settles over the crew. The lethargy has turned into a kind of living death. Men lie in their hammocks, too weak and apathetic to move, staring blankly at the wooden beams above. Their breath is foul, a sickly sweet, metallic odor of decay that seems to fill the cramped space below deck. It's the smell of rotting gums and dying tissue, a scent that clings to everything. You see the full spectrum of suffering around you. The man with the old scar on his arm, the wound has now completely reopened, a raw, festering lesion that refuses to heal. Another sailor has such swollen legs that they are as thick and hard as tree trunks, the skin shiny and stretched. The ship's carpenter, a man once strong enough to shape oak with his bare hands, can no longer hold his tools. His hands are too swollen, his joints too painful. This is the reality of a vitamin C deficiency. It's a systematic breakdown of the entire body. Your immune system collapses, making you vulnerable to any passing infection. Your body can no longer produce healthy red blood cells, leading to severe anemia, which explains the crushing fatigue and shortness of breath. It's a slow, agonizing, and undignified way to go. Historians estimate that scurvy killed more sailors than all other causes combat, storms, and other diseases combined. It was the single greatest obstacle to long-distance sea travel for centuries. The ship becomes a floating infirmary of horrors. Pig, the cook, does what he can. He boils up broths, trying to create food that requires no chewing. But his ingredients are the same salt meat and biscuit. There is no cure in his galley. The quartermaster Silas tries to keep spirits up, but his own face is drawn and pale. The captain knows that if they don't reach land or capture a ship, with crew will be too weak to fight, too weak to even sail the ship. They will drift aimlessly until they all perish. One of the more peculiar and tragic folk beliefs surrounding scurvy was the idea of the Tour. This was described as a tropical madness, a delirium that would cause a sailor to see the ocean as a lush, green field. In his feverish state, he would try to leap into this field and be lost to the sea. Whether the Tour was a distinct neurological symptom of advanced scurvy, a form of heat stroke, or simply a poetic description of a final, desperate act, is still a subject of academic debate, but the story captures the profound psychological despair induced by the disease. You feel yourself slipping away. Your world has shrunk to the confines of your hammock, the throbbing pain in your joints, and the metallic taste of blood in your mouth. The dreams of golden glory seem like a mocking joke from another lifetime. You didn't sign up for adventure, for freedom. You never imagined a slow, internal decay, a battle you couldn't even see, let alone fight. The real treasure, you now understand with a terrifying clarity, was never gold or silver. It was an orange, a lemon, a simple fresh apple, and you are dying for lack of it. The grip of scurvy is tightening, and the ship's larder is as barren of hope as ever. The salt horse is tougher, the biscuits are crawling, and the water is a shade of green you'd rather not think about. Hunger, which was once a dull, constant companion, is now a sharp, desperate predator. The body, ravaged by disease and starved of nutrients, screams for protein, for anything. And in this crucible of desperation, the definition of food begins to expand in horrifying ways. It starts with whispers. You hear some of the more desperate, or perhaps more pragmatic, sailors talking about the ship's other passengers. Not the weevils, they're already an accepted part of the diet, but the larger, furrier ones, the rats. Ship's rats are not like the field mice of your childhood. These are huge, bold, and intelligent creatures, hardened by generations of survival at sea. They are masters of the hidden world of the ship, living in the bilge, the deepest, darkest part of the hold, and in the spaces between the walls. They are as much a part of the crew as you are, and they eat the same provisions, often getting to the sacks of biscuit long before the men do. At first, the idea is repulsive. You think of them scurrying through the filth of the bilge, their first lick with stagnant, foul water. The thought of eating one turns your stomach. But then, one evening, you see a small group of sailors rigging a simple trap near a grain sack. The next morning they have one. It's a large, plump specimen, and they don't throw it overboard. They skin it with a practiced air that suggests this isn't their first time. They clean it, mounted on a stick, and roast it over a small, illicit fire in a bucket on the foredeck. The smell that wafts over is surprisingly not terrible. It smells like roasting meat. Your stomach, in a moment of pure, primal betrayal of your brain, rumbles with hunger. The men who cooked it share it amongst themselves. They gnaw the meat from the tiny bones with a quiet intensity. One of them catches you watching grins, his teeth stained brown. "See chicken leg," he says, holding up a small, roasted leg. "Tastes better than the salt horse, I'll tell you that for free." This term, sea chicken, or sometimes bilge turkey, was common sailor slang for a roasted rat. It was a coping mechanism, a way of rebranding a repulsive act into something almost normal, even humorous. It was a testament to the human ability to adapt to the most appalling conditions. The nutritional value of rats was, of course, minimal, but they provided fresh meat and, more importantly, a psychological victory over the gnawing emptiness of starvation. The practice of eating rats on long voyages is well documented, though whether it was a last resort or a semi-regular supplement is a matter of some debate among maritime historians. Some accounts treat it as a grim necessity, while others suggest certain crews became quite adept at hunting and preparing them, turning it into a grim shipboard routine. As the days wear on and your own hunger deepens, your revulsion begins to fade, eroded by sheer physical need. The sight of a roasted rat no longer makes you gag. Instead, you find yourself watching the hunters with a kind of detached curiosity, which then morphs into a grudging envy. They are eating. They are fresh meat. The turning point comes on a day when the cook declares there's not enough salt horse to go around for a proper ration. You are given only your biscuit, The hunger that day is a physical pain. It's all you can think about. That night when a sailor offers you a small piece of the sea chicken he has just cooked. You hesitate for only a moment, then you take it. You close your eyes and take a bite. The man was right. It's surprisingly mild, a bit gamey perhaps, but it's unmistakably fresh meat. It's tender. It's not saturated with a year's worth of salt. It's the best thing you've eaten in weeks. In that moment, your fine-tuned sense of disgust, your landlubber's prejudice, is burned away by the simple, powerful truth of an empty stomach being filled. You have crossed a line. You are now someone who eats rats. You look around at the gaunt, weary faces of your crewmates, and you realize that everyone out here has a line they thought they would never cross. The sea has a way of erasing them one by one. The man who would never steal, the man who would never eat vermin. The ocean doesn't care. It demands survival, and it redefines the terms of that survival every single day. You are learning the harshest lesson of the pirate life. It's not about the freedom to do what you want, but the freedom that comes when you are forced to do what you must. The sea chickens, while providing a grim sort of morale boost, are not numerous enough to feed the entire crew. The gnawing hunger persists, a constant, dull ache in the pit of your stomach. Your gaze, and that of every other man on board, inevitably turns to the one place you haven't yet tapped for sustenance, the ocean itself. You are surrounded by a vast, living soup, teeming with potential meals, but catching them is another matter entirely. Fishing on the open ocean from a moving sailing ship is a difficult and often fruitless endeavor. There are no quiet riverbanks or placid lakes here. Still, you have to try. The ship's carpenter fashions a few crude fishing hooks from scraps of metal. The sailmaker provides long, sturdy lines. For bait, you use what you have: a piece of salty, tough as leather horse, a chunk of rancid bacon fat, or if you're lucky, a bit of rat meat. You and a dozen other men line the rails of the ship, casting your lines into the deep blue, your hearts filled with a desperate, fragile hope. For days, nothing. The lines trail behind the ship, limp and lifeless. The vastness of the ocean feels mocking. It's full of life, but it refuses to share. The effort becomes a kind of meditative ritual of disappointment. You stare at the horizon, at the endless succession of waves, and you pray for a tug on the line, a sign that your luck is about to change. Then one afternoon a cry goes up. Fish on! A sailor is struggling with his line, his face a mask of exertion and disbelief. Other men rush to help him haul it in, hand over hand. The line strains, and you can see a large, dark shape fighting in the water below. After a tense struggle, they heave it onto the deck. It's a shark. It's not a huge one, but it's at least 6 feet long, and it thrashes wildly on the deck, its sandpaper-like skin scraping the wood. Its mouth a terrifying collection of serrated teeth. The crew gives it a wide berth until one of the more experienced men manages to subdue it with a blow from a belaying pin. A cheer erupts. It's a sound you haven't heard in weeks, a genuine, spontaneous cheer of triumph. Shark meat was not a delicacy, but it was a crucial source of fresh protein for sailors. However, it came with its own peculiar problem. Shark flesh contains high levels of urea, which helps the animal regulate its salt balance in the ocean. If not prepared correctly, this urea breaks down into ammonia, giving the meat a strong, unpleasant taste and smell. The common sailor's trick was to gut the shark immediately and then let the fillet soak immediately, and let the fillet soak in seawater for several hours, or even bury them in sand if on an island, to leach out the urea. It's a bit of practical marine biology that sailors learned through foul-tasting trial and error. Peg the cook, his eyes gleaming with a rare professional excitement, directs the butchering. The liver is carefully removed as source of oil. The fins are hacked off, sometimes dried to be sold in Asian markets if they made it to the right port. The rest of the meat is cut into thick steaks. That night you have a feast. The shark meat is grilled over the galley fire. It's firm, a bit chewy, and has a slightly metallic taste, but it's fresh. It's protein. It fills your belly in a way that biscuit and salt horse never could. For one night, the hunger is gone. The success galvanizes the crew. Fishing becomes the main pastime. Men start crafting their own hooks, experimenting with different baits. A few days later, there's another victory. A large sea turtle is spotted, sleeping on the surface. A small boat is quietly lowered, and a few men row out to it. They manage to flip the turtle onto its back and haul it aboard. The turtle is another godsend. Its meat is plentiful, and sailors believed it had different flavors depending on the part of the body. Some like chicken, some like veal. But more importantly, the turtle was a source of something even more precious than meat: fresh blood. In a desperate, pre-scientific attempt to cure scurvy, sailors would drink the blood of recently killed animals, believing it contained some vital, life-giving essence. Whether this provided any meaningful amount of vitamin C is highly debated by historians and nutritionists. The consensus is likely not, but in the face of certain death, you'll try anything. You watch as men line up to take a cup of the warm, salty turtle blood. You do too. It tastes grim, but it feels like you're fighting back. These small victories, a shark here, a turtle there, are oases in a desert of starvation. They break the crushing monotony of the preserved rations and provide a desperate, fleeting hope. They remind you that you are not entirely helpless. You can still wrest a living from this vast, unforgiving wilderness. The act of fishing becomes more than a search for food. It's a struggle for agency, a way to prove that you are still hunters, still providers, still men in control of your own destiny, even when you are at the complete mercy of the winds and the waves. The occasional shark or turtle provides a temporary reprieve, a brief, joyous feast that lifts the crew's spirits. But these moments are fleeting. The days and weeks between a good catch are long, and the gnawing hunger always returns, more insistent than before. The constant, grinding state of semi-starvation begins to work on the crew in ways that are more corrosive than scurvy. It eats away at the very fabric of your floating society. Discipline, once enforced by the quartermaster's stern gaze and the shared understanding of the pirate code, starts to fray. The men are listless and weak, but also irritable and suspicious. The camaraderie that had united you in the beginning is replaced by a sullen, self-preservationist instinct. Every man becomes an island of his own misery. You see it in the small things first. A drop trope that no one rushes to coil. A shared task done with grumbling resentment instead of teamwork. The night watches become harder to maintain, the lookout staring into the darkness with hollow, unfocused eyes. The ship itself seems to feel the neglect, its movements a little sloppier, its sails not quite trimmed to perfection. The hunger sharpens every grievance. A perceived slight, which would have been laughed off a month ago, now simmers into a silent, burning grudge. You see men watching each other, their eyes lingering on the ration in another man's hand. Is his piece of biscuit slightly larger? Did he get a more tender-looking piece of salt horse? Paranoia begins to sprout in the fertile ground of empty stomachs. The quartermaster Silas has the hardest job on the ship. He is the arbiter of fairness, the guardian of the rations. He has to divide the dwindling supplies with the precision of a diamond cutter, knowing that every eye is on him, judging every crumb. He does it with a stoic, iron will, but you can see the strain on his face. He knows that the authority of the ship's articles is only as to abide by them, and a starving man has little regard for rule. The relationship between hunger and mutiny is a well-established theme in maritime history. A crew could endure brutal discipline, harsh conditions, and the threat of battle, but a captain who could not find them food was a captain who would not be a captain for long. Starvation strips away loyalty and replaces it with a primal, desperate calculus of survival. Historians still debate the true motivations behind many famous mutinies, while some were about power or plunder. Many simply boiled down to the crew's belief that their captain was leading them to a slow, agonizing death by starvation. You feel the shift in the ship's atmosphere. It's a low hum of discontent that grows louder each day. You hear small groups of men whispering in the shadows, their conversations stopping abruptly when you approach. They are talking about the captain. Why haven't we sighted land? Why haven't we found a prize? Is he taking us in the right direction? Is he hiding a private stash of food in his cabin? The seeds of rebellion are being sown. The captain is aware of the mood. He walks the deck with a forced confidence, trying to project an aura of control. But his eyes are constantly scanning the horizon, a desperate hope for a sail, any sail. He knows his time is running out. He needs a victory, not just for the gold, but for the flour, the water, the barrels of salted pork that a merchant ship might carry. He needs to feed his men, or they will feed on him. One evening, the tension finally snaps. Two men get into a vicious argument over a dropped piece of biscuit. It's a tiny, weevil-infested fragment, but in this world of scarcity, it's worth fighting for. Fists fly. A knife is drawn. The quartermaster has to physically separate them, his voice like a thunderclap that cuts through the angry shouts. The fight is broken up, but the ugliness lingers in the air. The unspoken rules have been broken. You realize that your greatest danger is not the Royal Navy. It's not a storm. It's not even the scurvy. It's the man sleeping in the hammock next to you. It's the desperate hunger that can turn a brother-in-arms into a rival, an enemy. The pirate code, the dream of a democratic society of equals, is a beautiful idea, but it was written on a full stomach. On an empty one, there is only one law: eat or be eaten. The ship is a powder keg, and everyone is holding a lit match. The spark comes from the lookout, perched high on the mainmast. His voice is hoarse and cracked from thirst and disuse, but it carries across the deck with an electrifying urgency. Sail ho! Every head snaps up. Every listless body is suddenly bolt upright. Hunger and scurvy are forgotten in a single, adrenaline-fueled instant. You scramble to the railing, straining your eyes against the horizon. At first, you see nothing. Then, you spot it, a tiny, white speck against the vast blue. It's a sail. It is hope, made manifest in canvas and wood. The captain is a new man. The desperation is gone from his eyes, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. He bellows orders, and for the first time in weeks, the crew responds with speed and purpose. The langour is burned away by the heat of the chase. Ropes are pulled, sails are trimmed, and your ship, which had felt like a drifting coffin, comes alive. It leans into the wind, cutting through the wind, cutting through the waves with a renewed sense of purpose. This is what you were built for. The target is a merchantman, a fat, slow-moving vessel low in the water. That's a good sign. A ship sitting low in the water is a ship with a full cargo hold. Gold, spices, silks, no one cares. All you can think about, all anyone can talk about, is what might be in its larder. Barrels of fresh water. Sacks of weevil-free flour, casks of wine. Maybe even live chickens or a pig. The fantasy of it is so powerful it's almost a physical thing. You are no longer fighting for abstract concepts like freedom or fortune. You are fighting for dinner. This is the unglamorous truth at the heart of the Golden Age of Piracy. While the legendary pirates like Blackbird or Calico Jack are remembered for their vast treasures, a significant portion of their raids were driven by the simple, desperate need for supplies. A captured ship's greatest treasure was often not in its strong cups, but in its pantry. Historians analyzing ship's logs from the period often find that the most commonly plundered items were not valuables, but food, water, alcohol, sails, and rope, the basic necessities of survival at sea. Your role in the coming battle is clear. You are a boarder. Your job is to be among the first to create chaos. You check the priming on your pistol. You sharpen the edge of your cutlass. The fear is there, a cold knot in your stomach, but it's overshadowed by a ravenous hunger. You look at the merchant ship, and you don't see enemy sailors. You see obstacles standing between you and the full belly. As you draw closer, the black flag is raised. The Jolly Roger. It's a psychological weapon, designed to invoke terror and encourage a swift surrender. The goal of most pirate attacks was not a bloody battle. A fight meant risking damage to your ship and injury to your precious crew. The ideal outcome was for the merchant crew to be so frightened by the flag and the reputation it carried that they would simply give up without a fight, a practice that some historians call coercive intimidation. But this merchantman is stubborn. A puff of smoke erupts from its side, and a cannonball skips across the water, wide of the mark. They're going to fight. The captain gives the order, and your own cannons reply. The roar is deafening, the deck jumping beneath your feet as the guns recoil. The air fills with the acrid smell of gunpowder. The two ships draw alongside each other, a chaotic ballet of wood, sail, and cannon fire. Splinters fly through the air like deadly insects. A man near you cries out and clutches his arm, his face a mask of pain. But there's no time for sympathy. The grappling hooks are thrown, biting into the other ship's railing. Borders away. The captain roars. You take a deep breath, say a silent prayer, and swing across the gap, landing with a jarring thud on the enemy deck. For a few frantic minutes, it's a whirlwind of shouting, steel clashing against steel, and the flash and bang of pistols. The merchant crew is outnumbered and demoralized. Their resistance is brief and desperate. Soon, they throw down their weapons. The ship is yours. The fight is over. You are sweating, your heart is hammering, but you are alive, and you are victorious. The first thing you do is not look for the captain's stromkops. You and every other man around you make a mad dash for the galleon, the hatch that leads to the food stores. You have fought and won. Now it is time for the spoils, and the most valuable spoil of all is a simple, glorious, long-awaited feast. The moment the fighting stops, a wave of primal, ravenous energy sweeps through your crew. The discipline of battle dissolves into the chaos of plunder, but it's a focused chaos. While the captain and quartermaster secure the captured vessel's officers and logbooks, the rest of the crew swarms below decks, driven by a single, unified purpose. They are on a treasure hunt, but the treasure is edible. You follow the surge down the ladder into the merchantman's hold, and the sight that greets you makes you want to weep with joy. It's a vision of paradise. This ship was well stocked, only a few weeks out from port. The air doesn't smell of rotten bilge, it smells of fresh sampine of canvas, and most gloriously of food. You see barrels, and you know from the markings that they contain fresh water, not the green slime you've been choking down. You see sacks of flour, and when you poke one, a fine, clean, white powder spills out, with no-tell black specks of weevils. There are crates of potatoes and onions, their earthy smell a long-forgotten perfume. There are wheels of hard, yellow cheese that look and smell like actual cheese. There are casks of wine and brandy, a welcome change from the harsh rum. And then you see it. A small pen built into a corner of the hold contains a half-dozen live chickens and a fat sleeping pig. Actual living, breathing livestock. The crew lets out a collective, almost reverent sigh. This isn't just a meal, it's a resurrection. What follows is not a meal. It is a bacchanal, a frenzy of consumption. All notions of rationing and saving for later are thrown overboard. The immediate desperate need to gorge to fill the aching void in their stomachs overrides all logic. Peg, the cook, is in a state of professional ecstasy. He directs the slaughter of the pig and the chickens, his one arm moving with the butcher's manic glee. Fires are built on the decks of both ships. The galley stove, usually tasked with the grim duty of boiling salt horse, is now sizzling with thick cuts of fresh pork. The smell is intoxicating, a rich, savory aroma that drives the men wild. They don't wait for plates or utensils. They snatch pieces of meat straight from the fire, juggling the hot, greasy morsels in their hands, not caring if they burn their fingers or their mouths. You grab a piece for yourself. It's hot, juicy, and fatty. The flavor explodes on your tongue, a taste so rich and real it's almost overwhelming after months of blandness. You eat it like a wolf, tearing at the meat, the grease running down your chin and arms. You feel the strength, the life, flowing back into you with every bite. Men are breaking open casks of wine, drinking it straight from their tin cups, or even from their cupped hands. They hack off huge chunks of cheese and stuff them into their mouths. They find a barrel of apples, and the crisp, sweet crunch echoes across the deck as dozens of men bite into them simultaneously. It's a symphony of feasting. This type of post-victory binge is a common feature in accounts of piracy. After weeks or months of deprivation, the sudden abundance of resources would often lead to an almost complete breakdown of restraint. It was a violent reaction to a violent state of hunger. Some historians suggest this behavior was also strategic in a way. By consuming as much as possible, as quickly as possible, they ensured every man got his fill before any arguments over distribution could begin. It was a form of edible democracy. You see men with scurvy, their gums bleeding, forcing themselves to chew on the fresh meat and apples. their faces a mixture of agony and ecstasy. They seem to know, on some instinctual level, that this food is their medicine, their only hope of a cure. Imad sits by himself, weeping quietly as he eats a onion, layer by layer, as if it were the most precious fruit on earth. The celebration rages through the day and into the night. Sea shanties are sung, not with the weary tone of recent weeks, but with a full-throated, drunken joy. Men who were recently eyeing each other with suspicion are now clapping each other on the back. Sharing a bottle of brandy, their brief animosity forgotten, washed away by a tide of pork grease and wine. You eat until you can't eat any more, until your stomach is stretched and full for the first time in what feels like a lifetime. You find a quiet corner of the deck, lean back against a crate, and feel a profound sense of contentment. The world is good again. The future, which just this morning seemed like a short path to a miserable grave, is now bright with possibility. You have survived. More than that, you have feasted. You have reminded yourself of what it feels like to be full, to be strong, to be alive. The cost of this feast, the violence, the fear, the chaos of the battle seems a small price to pay. For tonight at least, you are not a starving wretch. You are a king, and your kingdom is this mountain of glorious, beautiful, life-giving food. The morning after the great feast dawns with the groans of 100 hangovers and overstuffed bellies. The decks of both ships are a scene of carnage, littered with gnawed bones, empty bottles, and the snoring bodies of pirates who passed out where they feasted. But the mood, despite the physical discomfort, is one of deep, satisfied relief. The immediate crisis is over. Now, the more orderly business of piracy can begin. This is where the quartermaster Silas truly shines. The captain may have led the battle, but the quartermaster is the chief operating officer of this enterprise. His job is to oversee the methodical, and more importantly, fair distribution of the loot. And on a pirate ship, loot means everything. Not just the gold and silver, but every bolt of canvas, every coil of rope, every barrel of flour, and every single sea biscuit. The captured merchant crew is put to work under guard, transferring the provisions from their hold to yours. It's a slow, laborious process. Your ship, already cramped, becomes a chaotic warehouse of barrels, crates, and sacks. But no one is complaining. This is wealth. This is wealth. This is wealth. Once all the goods are on board your vessel, the formal division begins. The entire crew gathers on the main deck. The pirate code, the articles you all signed when you joined, is brought out and read aloud. It specifies in clear terms how the plunder is to be divided. A full share for a regular crewman. A share and a half, or sometimes 2 shares for the captain, and the quarter for specialists like the carpenter or the ship's surgeon if you have one. Extra compensation is also laid out for injuries sustained in battle, a set amount of gold for the loss of an eye, an arm, a leg. This system of shares, known as the pirate democracy, is one of the most fascinating aspects of their society. It was a radical departure from the hierarchical pay structures of naval and merchant ships, where the captain and officers took the lion's share of any prize money. On a pirate ship, every man who fought was guaranteed a stake in the profits. The fairness of this system was paramount to maintaining crew cohesion. The quartermaster's role as the enforcer of this fairness made him, in many ways, more powerful in the day-to-day life of the ship than the captain. The exact ratios of shares could vary from ship to ship, a detail that historians still actively research and debate through the study of surviving pirate articles. You watch as Silas presides over the process. First, the valuables. A small strong box from the captain's cabin is opened. It contains a few bags of coin. Silas counts it out meticulously, dividing it into piles according to the share system. Each man comes forward to claim his portion. Your share is not much, just a handful of silver coins, but it's more money than you've ever held at one time in your life. It feels heavy and real in your palm, but the true focus is on the provisions. The food is the real treasure. You can't spend silver at sea. You can't eat it. But you can eat a potato. Silas directs the stowage of the food with an iron fist. He inventories every item, from the remaining haunches of pork to the sacks of onions. He knows that this bounty, which seemed infinite during the feast, will dwindle all too quickly. One of the more peculiar and telling details of this process was the bidding for non-standard loot. Items like fine clothing, fancy wigs, or books taken from the merchant captain's cabin would be held up and auctioned off amongst the crew. The winning bid would then be deducted from that pirate's share of the cash winnings. It was a way to ensure that even the luxury goods were distributed in a way the crew perceived as fair. Silas declares that from tomorrow, the ship goes back on strict rations. A groan goes through the crew, but no one argues. They understand the necessity of it. The feast was a celebration, but the sea is long, and the next prize is never guaranteed. The fresh meat will be consumed first, before it can spoil. The fruits and vegetables will be carefully rationed to make them last as long as possible. The captured flour and water are now the ship's main reserve, a bulwark against future starvation. You feel a sense of security you haven't felt since you first set sail. Your belly is full, your pockets have a few coins in them, and the hold is stocked with food. The ship is healthy again. The scurvy will begin to recede. The hunger is gone. The despair has lifted. This is the promise of the pirate life fulfilled. It's not a life of constant feasting and easy riches. It's a brutal cycle of deprivation and desperation, punctuated by moments of violent, glorious abundance. You have just survived one full turn of that wheel, and for now, you are at the top. You are rich. Not in gold, but in something far more valuable in the middle of the ocean time. The captured provisions have bought you weeks, maybe even a couple of months of security. But this wealth is perishable. From the moment the fresh food was brought aboard your ship, you entered into a desperate race against an invisible, relentless enemy decay. The mood on the ship shifts from the wild ecstasy of the feast to a state of anxious preservation. Every crew member understands, but every potato that rots, every piece of meat that spoils, is a day of life stolen from their future. The battle now is not against another ship, but against time and microorganisms. Peg the cook and Silas the quartermaster become the generals in this new war. The first priority is the fresh meat from the slaughtered pig and chickens. What couldn't be eaten during the feast must be preserved immediately. The primary method is one you know all too well: salting. Large cuts of pork are rubbed down with coarse salt captured from the merchantman, packed tightly into barrels, and covered with brine. It's a sad fate for such beautiful, fresh meat to be turned into the very salt horse you so recently despised. But it's a necessary evil. A barrel of salted pork is a guarantee of protein a month. From now, a haunch of fresh pork will be a stinking, maggot-ridden mess in a week. Another method used is smoking. A makeshift smokehouse is constructed on deck. A tent of canvas and wood where strips of meat are hung over a smoldering, low fire for days. The smoke slowly dries the meat and coats it in a layer of antibacterial chemicals, creating a form of jerky that can last for weeks. The ship is constantly followed by a thin, hazy plume of fragrant wood smoke. The captured vegetables present their own challenges. The onions and potatoes are stored in the coolest, darkest, and best ventilated part of the hold, laid out on canvas to prevent moisture from accumulating. Every day, a crewman is assigned the tedious but vital task of picking over the stores, inspecting every single potato and onion, looking for any soft spots, any sign of mold or rot. A single rotting potato can quickly spread its blight to its neighbors, ruining an entire crate. It's a monotonous but crucial job in the fight for food security. Then there are the fruits. The captured apples are a treasure beyond price, not just for their taste, but for their unknown-to-use scurvy-fighting properties. But they are delicate. They are handled with the care a merchant might afford to jewels. They are wrapped individually in cloth and checked daily for bruises or soft spots. The ripest ones are eaten first, a precious daily treat handed out by the quartermaster. A particularly clever, though less common, preservation technique you might witness is the creation of portable soup. This involved boiling down meat and vegetable scraps for hours and hours, skimming off the fat, until all that was left was a thick, gelatinous, protein-rich substance. This goo was then dried into hard, solid cakes. To make a meal, you simply had to break off a piece and dissolve it in hot water. It was one of the earliest forms of the Bouillon cube. The level of culinary technology required for this meant it wasn't a standard pirate practice, but on a well-supplied merchant ship, you might find a stash of it. The existence and use of portable soup is a fascinating footnote in the history of naval victualling, a testament to the constant search for a durable, nutritious food source. Even the cheese has to be managed. The large whales are wiped down with cloth soaked in brandy or vinegar, a trick to kill mold spores on the rind and prolong the cheese's life. Every scrap is valuable. The rinds, too hard to eat, aren't thrown away. They are tossed into the cook pot to add a bit of savory, cheesy flavor to the lobscouse. This frantic effort to preserve the bounty is a stark reminder of the precariances of your existence. You are a self-contained world, a tiny island of humanitarian resources with ruthless efficiency. The feast was a moment of glorious, wasteful abandon. This is the sober reality that follows. It's a race you can't truly win. Entropy is relentless. No matter how carefully you salt, smoke, and sort, the food will eventually run out or rot. But every day you can push back that inevitability is another day you get to live. Another day you can sail. Another day you might find another prize on the horizon. The race against decay is the most important trace of all. The good times, as they always do, begin to fade. The memory of the feast grows distant. The last of the fresh meat has been eaten or salted down. The apples are gone. The daily ration, while still better than it was during the darkest days, is shrinking. The familiar, monotonous rhythm of biscuit and salted meat is re-establishing its dreary reign. And then, the wind dies. It doesn't happen suddenly. It's a slow, gentle fading. The sails, which had been fattened full, begin to slacken. The ship's forward momentum slows until finally it stops completely. You are becalmed. You are adrift in the doldrums, a region near the equator infamous among sailors for its windless, dead calm. The sea, which had been your highway, is now a vast, glassy prison. The surface is like a mirror, reflecting a sky that is a pale, hazy, and mercilessly hot. At first, there's a sense of novelty. A day without the constant rocking and rolling of the ship is a strange relief. But the novelty wears off within hours, replaced by a creeping dread. The sun beats down with a physical weight. The deck becomes too hot to stand on with bare feet. There is no breeze, no escape from the oppressive, suffocating heat. The days begin to blur into one another, each one a perfect, miserable copy of the last. The ship just sits there, a speck of wood on an endless sheet of blue glass. The carefully preserved provisions, which had seemed so plentiful, now seem terrifyingly finite. Silas, the quartermaster, cuts the rations. Then he cuts them again. Your daily allowance of food shrinks to a bare subsistence level. A small piece of biscuit, a few tough shreds of salty meat. The water ration is slashed to a single cup a day, barely enough to wet your cracked lips in the blistering heat. The ship becomes a pressure cooker of anxiety and despair. The men, idle and with nothing to do but watch the food and water disappear, become sullen and withdrawn. The heat makes tempers flare. Old resentments, buried after the last prize, resurface with a vengeance. The ship, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, is now a floating cage, and you are all starving prisoners within it. This situation, being becalmed with dwindling supplies, was one of the greatest fears of any sailor. It was a slow, inexorable march towards death. You can't fight the lack of wind. You can't outsmart it. You can only wait and pray, and watch your resources vanish. Many a ship was found drifting aimlessly, its crew all dead from thirst and starvation, simply because the wind had abandoned them. One day, Silas makes a grim announcement. The food is gone. Not the biscuits or the salt horse, there are still a few of those left. The absolute last resort, but all the good food from the captured prize is finished. The last onion has been eaten. From this point forward, it's back to the absolute basics. A wave of profound hopelessness washes over the crew. The little bit of variety, the memory of real food, had been keeping them going. The debate among historians about what happens next on a ship in this situation is a dark one. When the last of the food was truly gone, crews were faced with the ultimate taboo, the custom of the sea. Lots would be drawn to determine who would be sacrificed to feed the others. It was a horrifying but grimly logical last resort for survival. whether pirates, who lived to this same custom, is a point of grim speculation. Most evidence for it comes from the accounts of shipwrecked merchant or naval sailors. You aren't there yet, but the thought hangs in the hot, still air. You look at your crewmates, not as brothers, but as competitors for the last few drops of water, the last few crumbs of biscuit. The social contract of the ship is dissolving under the heat of the sun and the acid of starvation. The captain tries to maintain order. He organizes work parties to scrub the decks and mend the sails, anything to keep the men busy, to keep their minds off their empty bellies and parched throats. But the work is listless. The men are too weak, too demoralized. You spend your days staring at the horizon, your eyes burning from the glare, searching for a cloud, a ripple on the water, any sign that the world is still moving. The silence is the worst part. The lack of the familiar sounds, the creak of the mast, the snap of the sails, the rush of water along the hull is deeply unsettling. It's the sound of stagnation. The sound of death. You are no longer sailing toward your fortune. You are simply waiting, or for starvation to claim you, and you have no idea which will come first. The doldrums have broken your bodies, and now they are breaking your minds. The combination of heat, thirst, starvation, and the return of scurvy creates a fertile ground for desperation and delusion. The ship has transformed from a prison into an asylum, floating on an endless, placid sea. Rational thought is a luxury you can no longer afford. In its place, folk remedies and grim superstitions flourish. Men, desperate to combat the returning horrors of scurvy, resort to increasingly bizarre and useless cures. One man, his gums black and swollen, spends hours religiously rubbing them with gunpowder, believing its sharp, sulphurous quality will burn out the disease. He only succeeds in agony, his mouth a raw, bleeding mess. Another group of sailors becomes convinced that the source of the sickness is the bad air in the hold. They burn small piles of tar and old rope below decks, a practice known as fumigation, filling the cramped sleeping quarters with a thick, choking, acrid smoke. They believe this purifies the air, but it only adds coughing fits and watering eyes to their long list of miseries. This was a common medical procedure of the time, based on the miasma theory of disease, the belief that illnesses were caused by foul smells. It was, of course, completely ineffective against a nutritional deficiency. You witness a sailor taking a piece of his precious salt beef ration, not to eat, but to create a poultice. He chews it into a paste and plasters it onto the swollen joints of his legs, hoping the salt humors of the meat will draw out the watery humors of the swelling. It's a desperate act of sympathetic magic, based on a complete misunderstanding of the human body. The most sought after, and perhaps most pathetic, cure is for the thirst. With water rations at a critical low, men turn to the sea itself. They know that drinking seawater is a death sentence. The salt overwhelms the kidneys and leads to dehydration and madness. But they try to cheat it. They sow crags in the ocean and suck on them, hoping to absorb just the water and not the salt. It doesn't work. It only leaves their mouths coated in a salty film, making the thirst even more unbearable. There is a strange and sad historical footnote about a distilling machine invented by a man named Hales in the mid-18th century, designed to make seawater potable. While some naval ships were equipped with these, they were often inefficient and broke down. The idea that you could cook the salt out of the ocean was a tantalizing dream for sailors, but for you on this pirate sloop, it remains pure fantasy. The debate among historians is whether pirates would have even bothered with such a complex machine, preferring to capture water rather than make it. The psychological strain begins to manifest in more disturbing ways. The Kalen tour, the feverish delusion of seeing the sea as green fields, which was once a story, becomes a terrifying reality. You see a man, his eyes wide and unfocused, suddenly stand up on the rail, babbling about going for a walk in the meadow. His crewmates have to tackle him and tie him down to stop him from leaping to his death. You start to have your own waking dreams, brought on by hunger and dehydration. You see phantom ships on the horizon that vanish when you blink. You hear the faint sound of church bells from your home port, a ghostly echo across the empty water. You have to constantly remind yourself what is real and what is a hallucination. The line between the two is becoming frighteningly thin. The crew's religious and superstitious beliefs come to the forefront. Some men pray constantly, their voices a low, hoarse murmur. Others look for omens in everything. A seabird landing on the mast is a sign of hope. A dolphin seen swimming away from the ship is a sign of doom. They craft crude charms from wood and bone, hoping to ward off the evil spirits they believe have trapped them in this coal. You are watching your comrades and yourself devolve. The layers of civilization, of reason, of hope are being stripped away, leaving only the raw, desperate animal core. You are all caught in a nightmare, and the only remedies available are placebos and madness. The ship is no longer just a vessel, it's in a cruel experiment, and you are all unwilling subjects in a cruel experiment. The real cure is wind. You have reached the absolute bottom. The hold is empty of anything that a sane person would classify as food. The last biscuit was eaten days ago. The last shred of sawhorse was chewed to a flavorless pulp. The water barrel is now a source of thick, foul-smelling sludge, doled out by the teaspoon. Thirst is a fire in your throat, and hunger is a hollow, aching chasm in your gut. Your body has consumed all its fat, and now it is consuming its own muscle. You are a walking skeleton, draped in rags. It is in this final, desperate stage that you are introduced to the ultimate act of culinary desperation: boiled leather. It starts with the rats, or rather, the lack of them. Even the ship's rats, the hardy survivors, have either starved to death or been hunted to extinction. There are no more sea chickens to roast, there is nothing left. Then, one of the oldest sailors on the crew, a man who has survived being becalmed before, does something that shocks you. He sits down on the deck, pulls the thick leather belt from his waist, and begins to cut it into small pieces with his knife. It's a slow, laborious process. The leather is old, stiff, and cracked from years of sun and salt. He gathers the small squares and drops them into his tin cup. He then takes his tiny ration of sludgy water and pours it over them. He takes this concoction to the galley, where a tiny, precious fire is still maintained, and places the cup near the embers to warm. The other men watch him, their expressions a mixture of horror and fascination. Is this madness, or is it survival? The old sailor lets the leather stew for hours. The idea is to boil the leather for so long that the collagen in the animal hide breaks down, releasing its gelatin into the water. The goal is to create a thin, protein-rich, gelatinous broth or leather soup. It's a method of extracting the absolute last possible calorie from an object that was never intended to be eaten. This practice is a well-documented, if grim, feature of the most extreme survival situations at sea and in sieges on land. There are accounts of sailors boiling their shoes, their belts, even the leather coverings of the ship's rigging. It was the final frontier of famine, a testament to the human body's incredible will to live. Whether the meager nutritional value it provided was worth the effort is a point historians and survival experts still discuss. It likely provided a small amount of protein and a psychological boost, the feeling of having eaten something. After what feels like an eternity, the old sailor decides his broth is ready. He lifts the cup. The water is now a murky, brown liquid, and the pieces of leather are soft and swollen. He carefully sips the hot, greasy liquid. His face is impassive. He then takes one of the softened pieces of leather and begins to chew it. And chew. His jaw works mechanically, grinding down the rubbery, tasteless material into something that can be swallowed. A switch flips in the minds of the crew. Horror is replaced by a desperate, imitative urge. If he can do it, so can I. Soon, other men are sacrificing their own belts, the soles of their worn-out shoes, any scrap of leather they can find. The deck of the ship becomes a strange, silent workshop of starvation. The air fills with the faint, unpleasant smell of boiling old leather, but smell like hot, wet animal hide. You look down at your own shoes. They are falling apart, the leather cracked and brittle. But they are leather, with a sense of surreal detachment. You take your knife and begin to cut a piece from the heel. You are following the herd, descending into a new level of objection you never could have imagined. You boil your piece of shoe. You drink the foul broth. You chew the tasteless, rubbery leather. It does nothing to satisfy the hunger. The emptiness in your stomach remains. But it gives you something to do. It's an act, a ritual of survival that stands in defiance of the passive, silent death that awaits you. By eating your own shoes, you are screaming at the empty sky and the flat sea that you are not done yet. You will not give up. You will consume the very clothes off your body before you surrender. It is a moment of profound degradation, but also of a strange, grim dignity. You have been stripped of everything: your health, your strength, your hope. All you have left is this last, desperate, irrational act of will. You are no longer a pirate, a sailor, or even a man. You are a creature, a starving animal, doing whatever it takes to see one more sunrise. The act of boiling leather has not saved you. It was a fleeting, desperate ritual that provided no real sustenance. The hunger has now moved beyond a simple physical sensation. It is a form of madness. And in this madness, the smallest of things can become the catalyst for the greatest of tragedies. The quartermaster Silas is conducting his daily, heartbreaking inventory. He has gathered the absolute last remnants of the ship's original provisions. It is a pathetic treasure. In a small cloth bag, he has the broken, dusty crumbs from the bottom of the last sack of sea biscuits. It might amount to a handful in total. This is it, the end of the line. He decides to distribute it one last time. It's a symbolic gesture more than a nutritional one. He calls the remaining able-bodied crew together, a small, skeletal group, and begins to carefully spoon a tiny pile of crumbs into each man's outstretched, trembling hand. It is a solemn, funereal affair. One man, a sailor named Jack, who had always been quiet and steady, stares at his small pile of dust. Then he looks at the pile in the hand of the man next to him. In his starved, paranoid mind, he perceives an injustice. The other man's pile seems larger. It might be a trick of the light, a figment of his imagination, but in his world, that tiny, imaginary difference is a betrayal, the death sentence. He has more, Jack croaks, his voice a dry rouse. Silas looks at him, his own eyes hollow with exhaustion. It is equal, Jack, as it always is. No, Jack insists, his voice rising with a frantic energy. I see it. You gave him more. Before anyone can react, Jack lunges. He doesn't go for Silas. He goes for the other sailor, his hands clawing at the precious crumbs. The other man, weak but desperate to protect his own meager portion, shoves him back. Jack stumbles and falls, but he comes up with a knife in his hand. It's a small dirk he used for mending nets, but in his skeletal grip, it is as deadly as a cutlass. He lunges again, and this time there is a wet, ugly sound. The other sailor gasps, his eyes wide with shock. He looks down at the knife buried in his gut. The biscuit crumbs scatter across the deck, unnoticed. He slumps to the ground. A collective, horrified silence falls over the crew. They have seen death in battle. They have seen men die of disease. But this is different. This is a murder over a spoonful of dust. It's a violation of the last thread of brotherhood that held them together. The value of food in these extreme situations cannot be overstated. A single biscuit could become more valuable than a gold doubloon. There are historical accounts from sieges and famines where murders were committed over a crust of bread or a stolen potato. Food becomes the only currency, and its possession is the ultimate measure of power and survival. The social contract dissolves, and the most basic, violent human instincts take over. Whether such an event happened exactly like this on a pirate ship is impossible to know, but historians who study the psychology of starvation agree that such breakdowns were not just possible but probable. Silas, the quartermaster, seems to shrink before your eyes. The authority he has wielded for this entire voyage evaporates in this moment of senseless violence. He couldn't prevent it. His rules, his fairness, his careful rationing, it all meant nothing in the end. He looks at Jack, who is now standing over the body, his eyes vacant, the bloody knife still in his hand. He looks at the dead man on the deck. He looks at the scattered crumbs being blown away by a breeze that is, with cruel irony, just beginning to stir. The fragile society of the ship has finally, irrevocably shattered. You are no longer a crew. You are a collection of starving, dangerous individuals trapped together. The trust is gone. The code is broken. You look at the man next to you, not as a potential threat. You look at your own knife. You look at the body on the deck. The price of a single sea biscuit, you now see, can be a man's life. The hunger has done what no navy, no storm could do. It has defeated you from within. It has turned you against each other. And as you feel the first real puff of wind on your cheek in weeks, you wonder if it has come too late to save you from yourself. The wind has returned. It started as a whisper, a faint catspaw on the glassy surface of the water, and has grown into a steady, life-giving breeze. The sails, for the first time in an eternity, are filling. The ship is moving. You are saved from the dead calm. But the mood on board is not one of jubilation. The murder over the biscuit crumbs has poisoned the air more than any disease. The fragile trust is shattered, replaced by a sullen, wary silence. The captain, knowing the crew is at its breaking point, makes a difficult decision. Jack, the murderer, cannot be allowed to remain. To keep him on board would be to condone the breakdown of all order. A trial is held, but it's a formality. The evidence is the body of the man he killed and the vacant look in his own eyes. The verdict is guilty. The sentence is marooning. Marooning was the ultimate punishment in the pirate code, a sentence reserved for the worst offenses: cheating a fellow crewman, desertion in battle, or in this case, a senseless murder that threatened the stability of the entire crew. It was considered by some to be a fate worse than death. It was a slow, solitary execution. A few days later, a small, uninhabited island is sighted. It's little more than a spit of sand with a few scrawny palm trees, a place that offers no hope of fresh water or sustainable food. It is the perfect open-air prison. A small boat is lowered. Jack, who has been kept in chains, is brought on deck. He is silent, his eyes hollow. He offers no resistance. The fight has gone out of him. He is put in the boat with two sailors to row him ashore. According to the classic pirate tradition of marooning, the condemned man is left with a few meager supplies: a pistol with a single shot, a small amount of gunpowder, a cutlass, and a bottle of water. The single shot is a grim offering of mercy, a way to end things quickly should he choose to. Whether this kit was a standard, universally applied practice or more of a romanticized literary invention is a subject of historical debate. Some accounts suggest the man was simply left with nothing at all. You watch from the rail as the small boat pulls away from the ship. You see them land on the white sand beach. You see Jack get out and stand there, a lonely, pathetic figure. The two sailors leave the bottle of water and the weapons on the sand, get back in the boat and row away. They don't look back. The ship begins to pull away from the island. Jack grows smaller and smaller, until he is just a tiny, indistinguishable speck against the sand. You try to imagine his fate. The terror of the first night alone, the desperate, fruitless search for water, the gnawing hunger returning with no hope of a ship's ration, no matter how meager, the madness that would surely come, brought on by solitude and despair. The final choice, perhaps, between a slow death from thirst or the quick mercy of the single pistol shot. You are not him. You are on the ship sailing away. You are the survivor, but you can't feel any relief. His crime was born of the same hunger and desperation that you feel in your own bones. He was just the one who snapped first. It could have been any of you. You see in his fate a reflection of your own vulnerability, a reminder of how close you all came to that same breaking point. The act of marooning is meant to restore order, to cut the cancer out of the crew. But it feels more like an amputation. The crew is smaller, the bonds between you weaker. The shared trauma of the doldrums, capped by this final, grim act, has left a permanent scar on everyone. You look out at the open sea. The wind is fair, and the ship is sailing well. You are heading towards shipping lanes, towards the hope of another prize, towards food and water and life. But the image of that lone figure on the beach is burned into your mind. The freedom of the pirate life, the grand adventure has led to this: a man left to die alone on a barren rock, because the hunger drove him mad. It's a stark, brutal lesson in the true cost of this life. The ship sails on, leaving the island and its solitary inhabitant to fade into the horizon and into memory. The wind holds steady, and with each passing day, the horrors of the doldrums recede, replaced by the familiar, monotonous routine of the sea. A few days later, your luck turns. You capture a small, lightly defended Spanish merchant vessel. The prize is not rich in gold, but it is overflowing with what you truly need: barrels of water, casks of wine, sacks of beans, and, most importantly, crates of citrus fruit, lemons and oranges. The effect of the fruit on the crew is nothing short of miraculous. Within a week, the scourge of scurvy begins its retreat. Gums start to heal, the horrific swelling in the joints subsides, the dark bruises on the skin fade. The lethargy that has plagued the crew for months lifts like a fog, replaced by a returning tide of energy and life. The men who were on the brink of death are now walking the decks again, their eyes clear, their movements regaining their old strength. You didn't know the science behind it, but you witnessed its magic firsthand. You have been resurrected by a piece of fruit. You eventually make landfall at a friendly port, a hidden cove, or a notorious pirate haven like Nassau. Here, the ship is repaired, the remaining plunder from the Spanish prize is sold or traded, and you get to feel solid ground under your feet for the first time in months. You spend your small share of the prize money on the fleeting pleasures of the land: a hot meal in a tavern, cooked by someone other than Peg, a bath, a soft bed that doesn't swing. It is here, sitting in a noisy, smoky tavern, a plate of real, fresh cooked food in front of you and a cup of decent ale in your hand, that you finally have a moment to reflect on your journey. You think back to the man you were, standing on the docks of your home port, dreaming of a life of freedom and adventure. The romance of that dream now seems like a cruel joke. You contrast the fantasy with the reality you have just survived. The fantasy was of swashbuckling duels and chests of gold. The reality was a daily, grinding war against weevils and drought. The fantasy was of roaring sea shanties and brotherly camaraderie. The reality was the sullen silence of starvation and the murder over a handful of biscuit crumbs. The fantasy was a captain with a parrot on his shoulder. The reality was a captain with desperation in his eyes, his greatest enemy not the Royal Navy, but the wind. The popular image of the pirate is a powerful and enduring one. The dashing rogue, the gentleman of fortune, the rebel who lives by his own rules. It's a story that conveniently leaves out the most important details. It airbrushes out the slimy water, the rock-hard bread, and the crawling insects. It glosses over the agonizing pain of scurvy, the gnawing madness of hunger, the desperation of boiling your own shoes for a mouthful of greasy water. The greatest myth about the Golden Age of Piracy is that it was golden. For the men who lived it, it was an age of iron hardship, of wooden ships, and of profound, unrelenting, gastronomic misery. Your greatest struggle was not for treasure, but for your next meal. Your most fearsome enemy was not a kraken or a cannonball, but the simple, brutal fact of an empty pantry. The historical debate over what truly motivated pirates will likely never end. Was it a desire for riches, a rebellion against the oppressive conditions of naval and merchant service, a search for a more egalitarian society? The truth is likely a complex mix of all these things. But one factor, often overlooked in the romantic retellings, is the simple, primal, and constant search for food. Many a man likely turned pirate not for a chest of gold, but for the chance to control his own larder, to never again be at the mercy of a stingy quartermaster on a navy ship. You take another bite of your hot, savory stew. The taste is divine. It is the taste of survival. You have lived the reality behind the myth. You have faced the true demon of the high seas, and it was not a monster with tentacles, but a simple, empty bowl. You survived. And you will never, ever look at a simple piece of bread the same way again. The story is over now. The ship has reached its port, and your long, arduous journey is at its end. The sounds of the tavern, the taste of the stew, the feeling of solid ground, they all begin to fade, softening at the edges. You can feel the weight of your voyage lifting, replaced by the gentle weight of your own blanket. The hard deck of the ship dissolves into the comfort of your bed. The harsh sun of the doldrums gives way to the cool, quiet darkness of your room. You are no longer on that desperate sea. You are safe. Let the memories of the hardtack and the salt horse drift away now like smoke on the wind. They are just stories, whispers from a long ago time. Feel yourself drifting with them, not on a harsh ocean current, but on the gentle current of sleep. The rocking of the ship becomes a slow, easy rhythm, lulling you deeper into rest. The struggles are over. The hunger is gone. There is only peace here, in this quiet harbor of the mind. You can finally let go, and let the tide of dreams carry you away to softer, kinder shores. The end of the article. Good night.